Up until the late 70s, there were only 1% of all Americans who identified as atheist or not believing in God. That number now is up above 12%. And that may not seem like a big rise, but that is a huge step towards people who just don't believe there is any God or anything in that religious realm. What does that mean? And why are so many people moving towards atheism? Well, one particular study has an indication. Welcome to Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard. Again, welcome back to Church Public. Thank you so much for choosing this channel today. I really appreciate it. Your time is super valuable, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you would, leave a review or give me 5 stars or something that really helps this channel grow. And if you feel this is interesting, important, and you want to share it with your friends, feel free to do so as well. You can also check me out at churchpublic.com or any of the socials at Church Public. Again, thanks. So today we are looking at atheism, and I'm not going to take a huge step at it. We're just going to do a big general overview because I ran across a study that has an interesting view towards where atheism comes from. And it actually surprised me because I thought most people are coming at it from a different place. And this study says no. Whether or not you believe the study, it's interesting, and I think it will at least help us inform how we live our life. Because here at Church Public, what we try and do is, 1, help you follow after Jesus, because that is the most important thing. You need to have that relationship with him. And 2, figure out how to live in this crazy, weird world. I want to encourage you and equip you to engage in the public square because we need to. We need to be able to speak the language. We need to know the words. We need to understand the jargon. We need to know how to engage with this world because it is quickly changing. And if we keep using the same old tricks, if we keep using the same old strategies for evangelism, the times will pass us by. And by and large, what I'd like to say is the times have passed us by. We're still trying to do Acts 2 evangelism, expecting that everyone we come into contact with has a knowledge of even the things, if you've been in the church at all, even like 10 Commandments things, or that there are 4 Gospels, or that there's any Gospels that are written about Jesus. Most people don't know much, if anything, about the Bible, and we need to point people back to that as a source, as a help, as the final authority. You don't even have to take my authority over it. I'm not the authority. I'm just a guy who's studied a lot and is trying to be as faithful as I can be. And I hope you do the same. Moms, dads, brothers, sisters out there, I want you to dive into the Word of God so that you can understand more about how we live this life. So today, I've always been interested in philosophy. I've always been interested in theology, got a couple degrees on those things. But I really want to help people understand some of the behind the scenes, hopefully not in a sleepy way. I'm just trying to help you understand a little bit of what's going on so that you can talk to people and you can understand where they're coming from, because I think it makes a difference. There's a big word called hermeneutics that is basically all it means is you look at how things are in a certain context or a certain culture or a certain period of time, and then you translate those things into the time that you're in so that people can understand better. And when you use a biblical hermeneutic, it means you just look at something and either the way it was originally in the text or the way that the world is now, and you try to make a difference. I did a post the other day about different Bible verses and different Bible translations, and I think that's really important to understand because unless you literally read the Bible in either Greek or Hebrew, if you're reading an English translation, it is a translation no matter what. And there are some that are good, some that are less good, or some that are accurate and some that are less accurate. I'll do another post about that, but you can check that out. I think I posted that on Instagram. You can go to @ChurchPublic on Instagram, read a few slides about different translations and why it makes a difference, which one you choose, and how you can decide what you're looking for in terms of translation. Really quick summary that I gave there. But anyway, the point here today that we're talking about is atheism, because it seems that I'm hearing about atheism more and more all over the place. And so I wanted to talk about it. And then I came across this study. And this study is by the Social, Psychological, and Personality Science. That's the organization that did this. But the reason I think this study is interesting is it actually helps us, maybe, if this study is to be believed, which it seems credible, you can go and read it. I'll put a link in the description. This study doesn't land where I thought it was going to land, because I've run into atheists. I've had lots of conversations. I've had apologetic conversations about whether the Bible is true or whether God is real and those types of things. And it seems like I would have guessed that most atheists got to their end, where they are now, by having rational ideas, having rational arguments, studying a lot into all of the world religions. And by the way, I've studied a lot into all of the world religions, and I actually ended up on the other side of it. I kind of went into undergraduate college at a secular institution attempting to learn all that I could about all the other things to see if Christianity was proved or disproved. And in my instance, the more that I studied other things, I studied a lot of different other things, the more that Christianity seemed like the only way to me. All of the other ones, to me, didn't make logical sense. And I'm a very logical person when it comes to this type of philosophy. It needs to make sense to me. And Christianity was literally the only one that made sense. I can give you book resources as well, like Love Your God with All Your Mind by Moreland, or The Case for Christ. There are a bunch of different great books. I'm not going to get into all of them right now. Of course, the classic C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. Those are all great books to begin to use your mind, because I think it's really important. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But to use your mind to figure out what you believe. It's really important to know what you believe. And that's what we talk about here a lot. So I thought that how you get to be an atheist is to study all of these other things and get to this place where you've eliminated all of the other options, and atheism is the way. Now, I know I don't have an atheist on to debate, so, you may be sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm an atheist, but that's not how I got there. Okay, that's an anecdotal reference. I'm just pointing to this psychological study that took a bunch of people, and they looked at all these things. I'm not going to read the whole study. It's very scientific language, psychological language. Again, I'll link it in the description. But their finding was actually the opposite of what I thought. And their finding was how people were raised, the environment and where they were raised, like family structure, friends, community, that has a way, way higher indicator of if you get to atheism or if you don't, if you follow along to some other belief. And I think inherently, if we really thought about that for a second, and we will, that makes total sense. It makes total sense because a lot of times, though you can't inherit your parents' belief or your family's belief, that definitely gives you a leg up in the direction that you go. And some people, of course, veer off from that, and they don't want to believe what their parents believe. They want to go a different way. They're influenced by some of their culture, sure. But a lot of people just go along with whatever their parents did because that is the environment in which they're raised. And, we know this. Intrinsically, we just know this. Like, of course, if your parents did certain things, your chances of doing those same things is just exponentially raised. That's just the reality of it, right? You do what your parents did. I mean, I don't know if you're a parent now, but sometimes you say things and you're like, oh my goodness, my parents said those same things. That's just a small example. But in terms of belief, if you're surrounded by a certain belief, the chances are you're going to stay in that belief. That's just what this study says. And the study says that the opposite of that is also true. If you don't have these strong beliefs, if you don't have religious beliefs around you, chances are that is what is going to lead you to atheism. And I think if I expand this out for just a moment, that this makes a lot of sense to me in the context of, for instance, America. Because it's been very clear to me for a long time that America has gone away from its Judeo-Christian values, its Judeo-Christian beliefs. We can all, I think, agree on that. It is just evaporated from the fabric of what America really was founded as. I've talked a lot about that. You can go listen to other episodes at churchpublic.com. But this was founded as a Judeo-Christian nation, not nation, but with Judeo-Christian values, undergirding, like supporting the foundation of our morals, what we believe, and how we act. And a lot of that was, for instance, like 10 Commandments and things like that, which I referenced earlier. And many people don't know the 10 Commandments anymore. Or maybe they know there is a 10 Commandments, but they have no idea what the 10 Commandments are or how they affect anything, or that they're even part of the biblical tradition. I don't know. Every time I have a conversation with someone about this, I'm surprised at how little some people know about it. And that's not a dig. It's just the reality that this nation right now, it's not allowed to be taught in schools the Bible at all, even as literature, which it's fantastic just as literature. That's actually C.S. Lewis' salvation story, as he was looking at it in terms of mythology and literature, and then found Jesus through that. Longer story. I'm not going to get into that right now. You can go read about it if you want to. But this idea that the Bible is taught just as literature or as foundational morals, it's funny because you have a lot of other mythology and things that are taught in schools as mythology, but we can't even teach the Bible as mythology, which is not what I believe. Just to be clear, I believe it is true and it is real, but you can't even teach it in school, almost any school across the country, unless of course you're in private education, which is a problem, because then all of this cultural fabric that our nation is dependent on, and it's dependent on it in the sense that we have to get our morals from somewhere. I've said that before, but it is true. We have to get our morals from somewhere. We have to know where our morals come from, and they can't just come from me, and they can't just come from you, or they can't come from the government. They can't come from the person who is the loudest or has the most power. They can't come from those places, because then it will just change with the times. Then it will just change with the culture, and that doesn't work. And you can look at, again, the Russian Revolution. You can look at France. You can look at China right now. Again, you can look at all these different places that try to impose morality based on something that somebody invented, and it just doesn't work that way, because there is no foundation for why you should or should not do a certain thing. So we get to this place where the culture just has no more biblical foundation. So it makes total sense to me that people are not growing up with religion, and they're not growing up in this place where atheism is grown. Because why would you believe in God if you never heard about a God, if your parents didn't talk about a God? And the reality is, a lot of people, unfortunately, in America today are either growing up in single parent homes or some combination of some blended family. And so this becomes really hard. And I definitely can appreciate that, and it is a tragedy. But the rest of the cultural fabric that used to be, again, up until the 70s, it was less than 1% were identifying as atheists. And the fact that it has exponentially grown so far, so fast, should make a big difference. Even in the last 10 years, it's gone from about 5%, according to polls, up to 12%. That's a really big difference. And it seems, from everything that I read, from everything that I can find, that it's going up even faster still today. Well, the time will tell how that goes. But it will be interesting that we see that the family, that the culture, that the church is definitely losing influence in this culture. Because now, as we've talked about, we look at like secular culture and current culture. The family is now defined as whatever you want to define it as. So within that definition, of course, cannot be biblical values and cannot be religious values. Because if you don't use a biblical definition of a family, then you can't use biblical values to define your family and found your family on. You see how that works? Like you can't just divorce, and I don't mean that in the terms of like actually mom and dad, though that's a piece too. You can't remove the Bible and then also have a foundation of the Bible, right? It's part and parcel. Like you either take it and you take it all, or you don't. Now, there's a lot of people on the interwebs, on social media, who take pieces of the Bible and put them together and make their own version of quote unquote Christianity. But that was a topic I covered a couple days ago, and we won't get into that too much today. I just think this is very interesting, and it's very interesting that, according to this particular study, that atheism mostly comes from the culture and the circumstances, and especially the family. It doesn't necessarily come from, I'll give a quote into this article here. This is Will Gervais, senior lecturer of psychology at Brunel University in London, who led part of the study. He says, quote, "A lot of people, atheists in particular, like to talk about how atheism comes from rational, effortful thought. This work," again, referring to this study, joins other recent surveys in finding this is not too accurate. Our best estimate is that atheism mostly comes down to cultural learning. Specific cues we're exposed to growing up about how sincerely those around us believe in God. Once those cultural inputs are accounted for, individual differences in analytic or cognitive reflection predict a little bit of variation, but it's a very small piece of the puzzle. Again, I think that's very interesting. I think it's interesting to note, and it actually makes me very hopeful. I know that may not sound hopeful in light of all the atheism statistics that I just gave you in terms of how fast it's growing, but I think it is really helpful. It's really helpful to know, because if atheism only comes from someone's careful study and evaluation of all of the things, again, you can probably look at some of the books back here. I have world religion books, I have philosophy books, I have a bunch of other things that I've read through over the years, and a lot more that aren't in this room, but I have done a lot of study. Again, not exhaustive because there's no way to be exhaustive on these topics, but I've done a lot of study on these things. And then, like I said, I came back to Jesus in going through all of these motions because none of the other ones made sense to me. They just didn't make sense. And I could go into each separate one. I'm not going to do that today for your sake, but maybe I will at a later time. We'll do a dive into separate religions and kind of compare them with Christianity. But for today, suffice to say, I thought the opposite was true. And from all intents and purposes, I just thought that is how it is. When someone goes into college or has a high school experience or postgraduate experience or something, and they study all these things, they just rule out religion or Christianity specifically, and that's the direction that is set for that. It's interesting to me that this study, again, you can believe the study or not, I'll link it in the description, you can check it out. It's interesting that this study actually finds the opposite, and in a large percentage. It's not even close. It's not like, half of people did investigative study and became an atheist. It was a very low percentage here. It was something like 90-something% had cultural environment that led to this. That's what they identified. So why I'm encouraged, I want to get back to that. I am encouraged because this is something we can deal with. And I don't know your situation. I don't know how your family is wired. And I know that there's a lot of broken family. I know that there is a lot of combined family or separate family. I know it's super complicated. I get that. And I can't solve that. What I can do is say, whatever situation you're in, whatever family situation you're in, whatever community situation you're in, the thing that you can do is lean into this. Because what we can do now, if we know that, or at least we believe that these ideas that either, are atheist ideas, or, as I would point to the bigger generality, I've cited some statistics before about how church attendance is down at the lowest point since it's ever been recorded. More people identify as spiritual but not religious, don't want to identify as a denomination, all of those things, right? The main church, Big C church in America, is going down in the sense that people just don't want to identify with a specific religion or a specific denomination or those types of things. But what we can do as believers, as individual believers, as fathers, as mothers, as home leaders, and spiritual leaders in our house, and then in our community as well, with our friends, with our churches, we can lean in and begin to teach these things and to live them out. So talk about them and do them, as Paul and James in a 1-2 punch talk about. It's not just works, because if you just do something, then it's just social justice or something like that, and you're just doing things to do things. And, the scripture says that's just a resounding gong and a clanging cymbal. It doesn't mean anything if you don't have the love of Jesus in it. Or if you just talk about it all day and you just process all these things, you don't actually do anything, that also isn't worth anything. You've got to do it. And that's where James comes in and says, you got to show me your work, right? Like old math class, right? You got to show me that you're doing something with this. You're not just sitting around doing nothing. So both of those things, the faith and the works, the words, the deeds, we have to match these things together and do something about it. We can do that in our individual lives. We should do that. I think God in Jesus talks about this through love your God with your heart and soul and mind and strength. That is an all-encompassing Hebrew idea that it's all of you. And that's where it's explained more in the words and deeds. You use your mind. You don't have to check your mind at the door to be a follower of Jesus. There's a lot of people who think, and I've heard this over and over and over again, to believe in religion is just idiocy, right? Religion is the opiate of the masses. A very famous person said that. I'm not going to say who. You can look it up. There's your homework. So it's not, though. That's the thing. There have been really, 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 really smart people in history in the last 2,000 years who were Christians. I would actually posit that most of the Western world was created or pushed forward in some way by a person who was a Christian. We could go through lots of lists. You can even just go back to just America. Again, most of the founders in America were some form of Christian. That's just a fact. So they're really, really smart people who are Christian, which means you can't just say that all Christian people are just dumb for believing in God. You just check your mind at the door. And God doesn't say that. When Jesus says, love God with all your mind, right? We are supposed to use our minds, and we can use our minds. And again, the more that I've used my mind and read through books and looked at philosophies and looked at religions and looked at different theologies, I've been more convinced about Christianity, not less. And that's been the story for many, many other people. So this is good news for us, because then we can lean in and say, oh, all right, I can lead my family towards this, and that may even have great implications for them for later. You can, know verses like train up a child in the way they will go, and then when they are old, they will not depart from it, right? That does have value. It's not a guarantee. It's not a prescription in the sense that if you do this, this will happen. It's a proscription. If you pour into your kids all that you have, all that you know about God and all that you know about the world, they will be more likely to follow that when they are old and when they move forward in their lives. And there's a bunch of other scriptures too. I'll just give you a couple before we end up here. Genesis 18:19. I have chosen him that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. This is a promise given to Abraham, but it also talks about how we, as dads, as parents, need to lean in and train our children, and it says direct them to keep the way of the Lord and do what is right and just. This is the important thing, and this is what we've got away from. We have gone away from this as a culture. We don't train our children in what is right. We send them to school and hope that the school teaches them lessons about math and reading and now all sorts of other wacky ideologies. But where are they getting the morality? And I would propose they should get it from you, the parent. And even as friends and as communities, we can lean into this. And the church, of course, needs to be a big part of this. As the church, we need to train people in how they need to be. And what is morality, what is moral, and what is not. I'll give you just a couple more here. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not exasperate or provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Same kind of thing. Great verse from Paul to the Ephesians and to us, just reminding us that we need to be intentional. I was talking to some dads the other day, and some of them were saying the effect of, I usually wait until my child, my son or daughter, has an issue, and then I deal with it when the issue comes up. I would propose the opposite, actually. I would say don't wait for your kid to bring it up to you, because one, most kids are too embarrassed to talk to their kids. And if you don't have a great relationship of talking already, like a good communication, chances are they might not ask you, and they might ask either their friend, which is a terrible idea, their teacher, probably also a terrible idea, or the internet, which is the worst idea possible. You don't want your child learning anything first from the internet. I'm just telling you, I'm just throwing that out there. Please don't let your child learn anything first from the internet. So I would say instead the opposite. If you're a dad, if you're a mom, volunteer some of this information. Of course, you have to factor for maturity and see where they are and figure these things out, but you've got to be going through these lessons. You've got to be going through morality and not just expect that an hour a week at church is going to tell them all of the morality they need in life. That is just a really small idea, and there is no way that 1 hour a week at church, even 2, can give your child everything they need to know about morality. There's just not enough time there. So you have to figure out how you, the parent, can lean in more and help your children figure out what is good, what is not, what is moral and what is not, what is right living, and how to do that. And this is maybe a call to our dads, to our moms out there to lean in more, because it is time. It's time to lean in more. And even like that's what I thought of immediately when I saw this article on atheism. It wasn't even discouragement. It was, oh man, a lot of people are headed this direction. So what can we do now in our homes, in our families, in our communities, in our churches to lean more into this and to try to help people understand? Because I think a lot of this is about what we do on a day-to-day basis. It's about what we say and what we do. We don't want to get to the point where your kid is now 20, 30, 40, and they're set in what they believe. Not that you can't, teach someone who is older, but it's harder. We just know this. That's why kids go to school when they're younger, because they're more interested in learning these new ideas and assimilating them into their souls and their minds and their morality. So we want to get them young. And I'll just leave with this one last thing that happens to be one of my favorite verses. I feel like I say that a lot. I do have a lot of favorite verses, but it's okay. I like it. So I have a lot of favorite verses. I'm allowed to. And this comes out of the story of Joshua. And I think it's just important because it helps us understand that no matter where you are, no matter where you're going, today is the day that you can choose to move forward. And I hear, I feel, I get feedback that people have regret for not doing things sooner. And I get that. And there's a lot of things I wish I could have done sooner and earlier in my life. But the reality is I am where I am. So sometimes it's just good to start where you are and move forward. That's really all we can do. And the good news is there's a lot of grace from God for that. But I love this out of Joshua because Joshua is dealing with not the same situation, but similar situations. A bunch of the people of God have gone off and believed in this God, and they've gone off and believed in this God, and they have idols, and they're worshiping the wrong way, and they're worshiping the wrong gods, and they're leading their families astray. And that's maybe one of the biggest things that I have a heart for. I want you to lead your family in the right way and lead your family towards the good. And I would propose the good is God, and the good is biblical values. And again, you don't have to take my authority. You don't have to take my word for that. But as Joshua would say, and this is the part that we're getting to because he gives this great speech, one of the greatest speeches, one of the greatest leadership and fatherhood speeches that I know in history, right? That we have at least. Because he ends up talking and he not only tells the Israelites what they should do as a people, he tells them what they should do as families. And I think this is what I love about it. And it's really important because he talks to them and says, you can decide whatever you want to do. And you, who's listening today, have the same choice. You can decide whatever you want to do. You don't take my word for it. You don't even have to follow God. You can go down the atheist path if you really want to, but you have to make a choice. And I want you to make an intentional choice, and I want you to make the best choice. And I don't want you to just get swept away by the culture, wherever the culture is going, because that just never ends well. I want you to be intentional about this. Dads, moms, grandmas, grandpas, I want you to lean into this and make the choice that's the right choice. And I would suggest, again, this biblical value is the right choice. Following Jesus is the right choice. You've got to make that decision. So Joshua ends up in this place where he says, Joshua 24, if serving the Lord seems undesirable, choose yourself this day who you will serve. In other words, go ahead. If you don't want to follow Jesus, fine. And I'll say the same. Fine. It doesn't hurt me at all. It hurts my heart a little bit because I want the best for you. But you have to make that decision. I can't make it for you. No one can make it for you. But Joshua goes on to say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I love that. He makes a declaration and says, here's basically the line in the sand. Like, if you want to go serve these other gods, fine. He lists them out there. I'm not going to do that right now because that's what we're talking about. It's following these other gods. We have weird gods today too. We have atheism today too. Or do you want to serve the Lord? Do you want to serve Jesus? Got to make that decision. And I would say too, it's this decision that you kind of have to make every day. Not that you choose salvation every day, but you have to die to yourself, deny yourself, be less selfish every single day. That's how we follow after God. You have to continually go on that journey. So I hope that for you, I hope you make this same declaration. I make that declaration just about every day and continue trying to lead my family and influence whomever you will listen to me. So thank you. If you've stuck with me this long, I super appreciate it. And I appreciate all the time and energy that you have spent allowing me to talk your ear off today. I just want the best for you and your family as you serve God. And I definitely hope you choose that today. God bless. And as always, keep the faith.